Hello and welcome back to another episode of Slugs, Bugs and Dirty Rugs, my exclusive experience of being homeless. You can listen to this on any of your chosen platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or any of the other ones that it happens to appear on. In the last episode, we covered the first few days of me being homeless and what it was like, what I experienced, and how underprepared I was, and how I just stuck my head in the sand and just thought that none of this was actually happening to me, and things would just mosey on by, as you know. Today, in episode 3, we are going to find out just how bad things could get in the days that followed, the days and weeks that followed, in fact. And what I like to call my settling in period. Every house has a settling in period. This is no different, except for there was no house. Okay, so it's me settling in, getting used to my surroundings, not quite on the same level as the first few days where I was just hanging out in pubs and clubs and crashing on people's floors and things like that. It was hardcore, proper homeless style-y. Precursor to. And yeah, it was... I had a difficult time adjusting to the whole homeless spectrum, right? Homelessness was not for me. It was something that happened to other people. I was quite well brought up, and I said this before in one of the other episodes, that I was quite entitled, and things just were given to me, not overly, but I wanted for nothing, basically, in my growing up, in my life. I had lots of friends, I had lots of things, I had, decent enough Christmas and birthdays and things like that. I had a nice time, and I fully appreciate now just how other people did not have it quite so well. So, when it came to me being homeless, I didn't want that to be a thing for me. It was quite embarrassing. Although I would, as I mentioned before as well, that I would tell everybody that I was homeless, because it was the only way of getting any help. People help you when they know what's wrong, and I had nothing to lose, really. But that being said, I was still very raw and not willing to accept the fact that, I was this homeless person who had nothing and was just walking about the streets all day looking homeless. I'm sure I must have looked homeless. It never felt like that at the time. I just felt normal. I had my jacket on, and I had this big, I had quite a big coat at the time. It was not quite sure what material it was, but quite woolly, so quite good for the weather. And I used to wear 2 hats at night. I had my scarf on, and I had my jeans and tops and things like that. I had quite decent clothes, but the one thing that you would find very quickly is, it doesn't matter what you're wearing, once it rains, you ain't never getting dry or warm again, right? So it does not matter if you have the warmest clothes in the world. It's like being stuck out in the snow, right? Once you get cold, unless you get into the heat, you're not getting warm ever again. It's just like that. And at night, when I would go to sleep, I would get drenched upon drenched, because this was September time, and it was obviously it's a wet month. We're getting towards the end of the year, It's very cold, and it's just rainy a lot. It's raining a lot of the year in the UK anyway, and this time of year it was just raining. So I'd go to sleep at night, and if I did not have a shelter, I would get drenched, and I'd wake up, I'd walk around the next day being just soaked and freezing with no way of getting dry again. So that's the one thing I think I learned the quickest, is not to go to sleep without shelter. I know it sounds obvious, and it sounds very like, why didn't you think of that in the first place? But as I said, I was fairly young, I was inexperienced, I don't know a lot about much, and you kind of think, oh, I can take a bit of rain, I can take a bit of getting wet, but once you do get wet, you don't get dry again very quickly, and you get cold, and you stay cold, and that is the main thing that I remember. So when I first came to the realization that I might have to spend a little bit of time out and about in the cold and sleeping rough and things like that, I didn't go very far in terms of where to sleep. I basically hung around the main vicinity of the house, my mum's house, and yeah, I mean, my mum used to spend every second day at the house and every second day at her partner's house, so I kind of got into a routine. Mainly, I actually ended up sleeping in the backyard of the house, on the floor in the yard. Very convenient, but I didn't know where else to go. I didn't want to stray very far because I didn't know where to sleep. I didn't know what to do, and I felt kind of safer there. It was part of me unable to let go, and I would sleep on the floor there. At one point I had a sleeping bag, so that was good. That lasted one night, because I said you need to stay warm and you stay dry overnight. Well, whilst that is true, with a sleeping bag you can do that, it only lasts one night. Seriously, because once the heavens open up, the entire sleeping bag gets drenched and you can't use it ever again. So that was a waste of time. So yeah, after that I didn't have a sleeping bag again, and fortunately at one point there was a desk. My mum was throwing stuff away, and she put like a desk in the backyard, and I ended up sleeping underneath it. And then that was eventually must have gone to the tip or something like that. So again, I ended up sleeping basically on the floor in the open, kind of getting covers and things like that, and rugs. This is where the whole title of my book and podcast has come into it. I've called it Slugs, Bugs and Dirty Rugs. And funny story is that I actually thought up this title for the book back when I was actually homeless. I thought to myself, one day when all this is over, I'm going to write about this, and that's what I'm going to call it. Because in the backyard, especially where I started off sleeping, there was a lot of slugs. Hate slugs. I hated them then, I still hate them now, but not because I had to sleep amongst the slugs, but I just didn't like slugs. They're like slimy things, give me like the creeps sort of thing, I don't like them at all. Anyway, there were slugs out there, I guess bugs, and rugs that I had to sleep under. So slugs, bugs and dirty rugs. That is what I came up with back when I was actually homeless. So I would sleep out there a lot, and another funny story. Well, it's not that funny actually, and you're going to think this is weird, right? But on the nights where my mum was sleeping at her partner's house, I used to go and knock on the door of the house, my mum's house, because my brothers would be there, right? And I'd knock on the door, and it was a very weird setup. My family dynamic is weird, right? If you think yours is weird, mine is exceptionally weird. So there was my younger brother there and my next eldest brother, because I had 3 brothers but only 2 lived there. So my youngest brother and the one just above me, just older than me, he was there, and he would never let me in ever, because he was like, he's very much like, he doesn't want to upset my mum, and he doesn't like to upset what's going on. And I don't know, maybe he has a little bit of fear that he's going to be the next in line, but he had no problems, because he was like, he was working and very hard working and everything else, so he was fine. But he wouldn't let me in, and he would always send me away. But my younger brother, he would always let me in, and he'd let me stay there inside the house until about 10 o'clock at night, where my older brother would chuck me out for the evening. It was not a nice situation, right? Basically, once I was in, my older brother wouldn't let me in, but once I was in, he would talk to me normally, like we'd talk about football and things like that, right? But once it got to about 10 o'clock and he was going to go to bed, he would chuck me out, because I wasn't allowed to stay there. My mum had said that I wasn't allowed to stay there, so I wouldn't. And then he would throw me out for the evening. I found it a little bit, I still find it a bit odd. I kind of get it, but I do find it a bit odd that he would just sort of talk to me like a normal person, then at 10 o'clock, off you go, out you go. I remember once saying, I don't want to go outside because there's slugs out there. But it didn't make any difference anyway, so I had to leave and go. And then one night, this was another weird one, right? One night, I was sleeping out the back, and my mum was supposed to be at her partner's house that night, but apparently she wasn't. They slept at this house instead, and my mum obviously looked out the window and saw me lying in the backyard, just lying there, trying to sleep, I guess. And she came out the back, she nudged me and said, right, get inside, you can sleep on the couch tonight, but I want you gone first thing in the morning. And I guess she actually felt guilty because it was actually like raining and everything, so she did kind of feel guilty about the fact that I was sleeping out in the back garden whilst she was inside in a nice warm house and everything. So I slept on the couch in the living room, and first thing in the morning, it was about 7 o'clock in the morning, she comes in, she wakes me up and says, you've got to go before everyone else gets up. So basically, she did that nice thing, but she didn't want other people to know that she had a moment of weakness and actually allowed me to stay inside. But that's just another thing that happened there. One other night, because I was running out of places to go, right? My mum had been was starting to get a bit antsy about like me hanging about so much. Obviously she knew that I was hanging around all the time. One time, because as I said, I used to go to the house, knock on the door every couple of nights, but one time I knocked on the door and my mum answered, and I wasn't expecting that, and she told me to go, and I was like pretty pissed off because I didn't have anywhere to go. She had a nice warm house, you know, and I didn't have that. I didn't have anywhere to go. So what I did was I walked across the road and I stood by there was like a park, as I said before, there's a park there, and there was railings. I just stood there for like half an hour, just standing there doing nothing, because I did not have anything else to do. So when she moved me on and told me to go, I didn't have anywhere to go. So I was making that statement, I was making that point. I didn't have anywhere to go. So I went and I stood there, and I just stood there. I guess I was looking, I don't know. I was looking at the house, I don't know, I can't remember. But then she actually came out of the house. She walked across the road and she came up to me and she said, if I don't move on, she's going to call the police. And at that point I thought, fucking hell, no. This is kind of real. I don't know what to do now, but I'm going to have to go, because firstly I don't want the police called on me, but the whole situation is getting a bit sort of out of hand. Anyway. Yeah, that was that's not nice, having your mum threaten to call the police on you. You know, I don't know if I've expressed this enough, but this isn't what my mum was all about when I was growing up. She was nothing like this. Absolutely nothing like this. Completely like a different person. And it was just kind of sad, but also, I don't know, what can you do? Right. Another night. This was a bit crazy, right? Because I told you about that shed in episode 1. I told you about a shed that I stayed in the backyard, in the back, right? There was a shed, but I didn't try that again, because from the last time I was there, it was completely like, it was so cramped and you couldn't move. It was impossible to sleep in there. But what we did also have, we had like a garage, and the garage door was locked, so I couldn't get in, but I didn't know where the keys were kept, so I kind of took the keys and I tried to get into the garage, but I think I broke the lock, because later on they complained that I broke the lock and they had to get it replaced. But either way, I managed to get into the garage and I went to sleep in there. Nice, and it wasn't warm, but it was not wet. It was perfectly dry. Undercover, perfect, but it was pitch black. There was no light in there whatsoever, and to this day I have no idea what it actually looked like whilst I was inside, because it was so black, so dark. I had no clue what was going on inside that garage, except for I tried to sleep on the floor, and all across the floor was like dirt and dust and grit and everything. That's all I could feel. So I don't know if I got much sleep that night, but it was really was quite horrendous trying to sleep in that situation. I remember sneaking out the morning after and just like trying to get away without being seen. That was always one of the difficult things. Without being seen was difficult. But yeah, one of the other things was when I moved out. I say moved out when it became clear. Remember that week that I was supposed to be away, and that week that I was given to get away, my mum was going off to Spain and I was given a week. During that 1 week, the one thing that I did do was I got a spare key cut because I'm not stupid. Right, so yeah, I did that, and during the course of the first week or so that I was away, I managed to let myself into the house, and I got some clean socks, and I think I might have had a wash, possibly a shower. I'm not quite sure. I think I used the time just to get warm and get all refreshed and everything, but that was the only time I could do that because it was I can't remember. I think I stayed as long as it was possible, because I remember being in the kitchen on the constant lookout to see if anybody was coming, if the car was pulling up, and being worried about it. Will I be able to have enough time to escape, disappear out the back? I wasn't. I don't find it like an enjoyable experience, always being on edge like that, but it was the only time that I could manage to do it, because they found out that I'd done that, and they ended up changing the doors, the locks on the doors. So yeah, that was that was that. It was one of my favourite memories, and I don't want to call it my favourite, but it was one of the things that stands out in my mind forever, is this one experience I had. During this time, I was always thinking about, where can I stay? What can I do to make things better, a better situation for me? Because I still don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, or where to go, or what the future holds. But I did remember this one occasion where, not too long before I became homeless, I had a friend, and he showed me this flat which was empty. It was his sister's flat, and then above it was an empty flat, and he showed me that the door was open. It was open all the time, and we went up there and just had a mess about, and it suddenly struck me, that flat is open. If the door is open, I can get in. Can I get in? Should I try and get in? That's what I was thinking. Is it something that I should try to do? I need somewhere to stay. I'm sleeping on the floor and it's freezing and it's uncomfortable, right? So I trundled along. It wasn't too far the walk. I trundled along to this flat, and I opened the door, pushed it open, and it was open, and I was like, oh my god, it's open. But the fear within me was so intense, sneaking into this flat, which obviously wasn't mine, and just sneaking in and been worried the whole time. Am I going to get caught? Am I going to get caught? If I get caught, what am I going to say? What, And I had to up these stairs, and when I say creak up, the stairs actually creaked, so it was like, oh my god, people are gonna hear this. I could hear the dogs next door. That was my friend's sister's house, and I could hear their dogs, and I was like, they're gonna hear me, the fear inside me was so bad, it's unbelievable. I managed to get up the stairs into the flat, and I was like, what do I do now? There was a bed there as well, a proper bed, and I lay down on it, and I was like, okay, this is nice, but I'm so scared. Really scared that somebody's gonna know that I'm there, and I'm not going to get out of this properly, right? So I think I managed to sleep, because I don't think I've slept at this point properly for a long time anyway. And I slept through the night, and I woke up probably about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, instead of hanging about there for a bit, which could have been an option, I guess, I just thought, I need to go. I need to get out of here before people like wake up and get about their day, because I've got to get out. I've got to get back down the stairs, which I knew was creaky from the night before. I've got to get outside, open the door without anybody seeing. I don't know if anybody's on the other side of the door, if they're going to see me. I just didn't know, so I wanted to do this and just get gone, basically. Although I'd enjoyed having it somewhere to stay, it just felt too scary to stay there. So I did. I snuck downstairs. I crept outside the door. Fortunately, there was nobody around, and I walked, and then I ran. It's one of those occasions where you're like, your heart is pounding, like you know that something could go wrong. You just need to get out of that situation quickly. Fortunately, nothing came back on me, but what did happen, and this is quite a good indication of how lucky I was the night before, is I went back the next night, and that door that was open before was no longer open. It was locked. So obviously whoever has the keys knew that somebody was sneaking around, and possibly, you know, they'd heard me or heard something and thought, let's lock this up, and they did, and I didn't have anywhere else to go after that. So yeah. So those were my first days, probably about a week or so, I guess, that it covers, of me settling into life in the homeless lane. And at this point, I'm getting used to sleeping rough, although for the majority of the time I'm still just sleeping within the vicinity of the house, so I haven't really gone very far, and I don't know if I'm intending to go very far. But in the next episode next week, if you'd like to tune in again, we're going to see how I find my feet and how I moved on from that area of the house to a proper homeless location, shall we call it. So that's exciting. Please join me again for the next episode. In the meantime, if you have any thoughts about any of this that I've talked about, please contact me and let me know what your thoughts were, because I'd love to know how you're enjoying this. If enjoying is the correct word, you know, are you getting anything out of it? Are you finding anything out? Are you intrigued to find out more? Please let me know, and we can talk about it. Until next time, take care of yourself, Bye bye.